Greetings and thank you for joining us at soundmoneycampaign.com. Our guest today is Jay Taylor of jtaylormedia.com. He is a resource investment expert and stock analyst. Jay, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure to be with you.
Jay, many have now commented about this 8:20 a.m. Eastern Standard Time takedown in the gold price that almost happens daily. Are you tracking this as well? And if so, what do you make of it?
You know, I don't watch it as closely as some of my friends at the Gold Antitrust Action Committee does. For example, I believe that there is an effort to, as part of this propaganda campaign to keep people believing in paper money. And certainly if gold were making new highs all the time, as it had been there for a couple of years after Lehman Brothers, well, then I think, people would be losing confidence in the paper. So again, I don't know to what extent somebody, Bernanke and people at the New York Fed get together and decide they're going to hit the markets. It seems like that's what's happening, and they're certainly bullion banks are an oligopoly for sure. I mean, there's only a handful of these guys that control these markets. So whether they're acting in their own self-interest and talk the market down, and then short the market, make money on the downside, go back in and buy it when it's down, and then have some analysts come out and talk it up, and then I think they're doing that. I think they're playing games and manipulating markets in that regard. Whether somebody's sitting up there at a higher level and formally dictating that kind of market behavior, I don't know, and I think you couldn't ever prove it. But it wouldn't surprise me. All I know is that gold is real money, and the stuff they're creating out of nothing is a fraud. And so I like companies that produce the real thing, because I think in the long run, the real thing will win.
Gold was down around 6% for the past 5 trading days, but the mining stocks are down anywhere from 10 to 25%. Is this an opportunity to begin entering some positions in mining companies?
Well, I think people have. I think the answer to your question is yes. It's a good opportunity. I think probably the shares are it's a more opportune time to buy the shares than the bullion at this point in time, because the shares have been hit so much harder than the bullion. That said, we are seeing a lot of the analysts scaling back their projected profits because with the rise in commodity prices since Lehman Brothers, more recently over the last year or so, when gold has not gone anywhere. Sort of a sideways market, we've seen the real price of gold come down, and that has squeezed some of the profits to an extent from the mining companies. So I think more than ever, people have to be very selective in their purchases of gold mining companies. I like to start out with those that are producing. I like the streaming companies. I like some of the other smaller producers that have cash flow. But where the really big money is going to be made, where the big profits will be made, will be with the successful juniors, the ones that find enormous amounts of wealth in the ground. But there, you're also dealing with more risk. You're also dealing with companies that have to go out and raise capital in the markets. So you want to be very careful. And Brazil Resources, it's a favorite of mine among the exploration companies because of the quality of management, the ability to raise capital, and to select some really great projects, and also to attract the talent, which Amir Adnani is able to do with Brazil Resources. I mean, it all boils down to management in the end. And not only does Brazil have Amir leading the show, but he's attracted great talent, and he's also attracted some good financing sources. In fact, an institution in Brazil that should be very, very helpful in more ways than one to Brazil Resources.
Jay, what about protecting yourself from the U.S. government? Is it wise to seek out companies listed on the TSX with projects outside of the U.S.? For example, the one you just mentioned you said was in Brazil.
Well, I think that's a very good observation. It's good to have your portfolio spread out geographically, diversified geographically, and there are countries around the world that give me the willies. Brazil is not one of them at the top of that list. So I think that we're looking at Brazil as a good place to have some of your assets parked. So that would be another reason to own a quality mining company like Brazil Resources. There are others down there too, but that's one that's at the top of my list.
Jay, the spotlight was on gold this week, but silver also really took a big hit. With silver being both an industrial metal and a precious metal, do you think silver can sustain itself near the $30 mark as we re-enter an official recession here in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I don't know that if we're really heading into a recession, I expect that gold will outperform silver substantially, because silver is much more of an industrial metal, as you mentioned. But silver is, it is definitely it's a monetary metal. It's second to gold in my view. Some people think it's better. I think some people define it as poor man's gold. I think you need to have some junk silver. You should have some around for sure. No, I don't know that it will perform better for going into a recession. I think it might not hold $30. But then here's the other thing that people need to really look at. When we're always focused on gold and silver is determined by that fraudulent measure called the U.S. dollar. And what I think people should rather do is look at what will gold buy and what will silver buy in terms of a basket of commodities. And both metals did remarkably well for quite a while, and still are doing quite well since Lehman Brothers. Both of them gained tremendous amounts of purchasing power vis-a-vis other commodities. Recently, that's fallen back, which is, as the risk-off trade is back on, now people are buying more commodities, and commodity prices have gone up relative to these two monetary metals. And that is one of the reasons, as I said, one of the reasons why I believe that the mining company profits are down. If we go into a recession, ironically, I think that's bullish for gold and to a lesser extent for silver, because I suspect that the real price of those monetary metals will rise again, which will then bring about a boost in the profits of those mining companies.
Jay, during the past week, gold has seen a fairly large move down. We've seen these in the past, but this time the media really jumped in with headlines about a death cross and the gold bull market being over. To top it off, the Federal Reserve came out and said they might be altering their bond buying program. So we would like to get your thoughts on the past 5 days, as well as your opinion on if this was a deliberate strike by the large bullion banks and Western central banks.
Well, I don't know to what extent these propaganda campaigns are concerted and planned, or whether they're just individuals that are acting out of their own perceived self-interest. I think there's no question that there is a huge dislike or hatred for gold among the establishment, because gold competes with paper money, not only for the hearts and minds of people, but for the honest resources of people. And the dishonesty, of course, is on the side of the establishment. The current fiat currency system, which is a way of those who control that system to wrestle wealth away from those who actually create it, the miners, manufacturers, inventors, farmers, people who actually do something. So the whole system is biased in favor or against gold. And interestingly enough, I had Mark Skousen as a guest on my own radio show last week, and he was talking about a group of economists, the American Economic Association, met in southwestern United States recently, and they were asked a question about whether we should return to a gold standard, and there was 100% against doing so by all of the economists. 100%. It was all divided on whether we should have, on how much debt matters, on whether minimum wage is a problem or that. But when it comes to gold, there's 100% unanimous opinion against gold on the part of the economic establishment. These are people that have been, of course, trained through our establishment and have their degrees from prestigious institutions, and they all hate gold. So there is a bias there, and to what extent it's concerted, it does definitely seem to be a pattern at times when the markets get hit real hard, sometimes when there's very little trading volume or at certain times of the day. And I think more than that is the talk that comes out of the Fed and the establishment. You mentioned the talk about taking QE away. Well, I think that in part is to keep people believing in the integrity of a system that doesn't have much else going for it other than talk, because the debasing of the currency is relentless. The Federal Reserve is expanding its balance sheet. It's creating money out of nothing. It's devaluing the savings of individuals through the debasement of the currency and through zero interest rate policies. So I would guess that in part they're just trying to keep people off balance so they don't bet in one direction in favor of inflation hedges. The Fed pays a lot of attention to perceived inflation or anticipated inflation in the future. So they want to keep people believing that that's not going to be a problem, and they need to do that in order to keep people believing in the dollar, which they create out of nothing. So it's a gigantic con game, and in the end, of course, Pinocchio's nose will be exposed, and in the end, markets win out. So I think this is actually, as I look at gold, it's taken a real hit recently, and silver too, of course, both of the monetary metals, as a result of some of these shenanigans. But in actuality, I think we're looking at a great buying opportunity probably for gold. Although I'm not saying it can't go a lot lower, I think it still could, but certainly gold is looking like an opportune time to pick some up if you feel you need more in your portfolio. Those mining companies.
In closing, what is your overall assessment of the stock market and the economy right now heading into the rest of 2013? And if we do face another Lehman-type moment, do you see the precious metals falling, or will the next crisis be a currency event?
Yeah, I think initially probably they go down again relative to the dollar, but then probably rise just as they have the last time. It's hard to say, but that's my sense, is that because the initial reaction of people until they stop believing in the currency. Those of us that consider ourselves gold bugs have lost confidence in the currency a long time ago. We keep using it because we have to, because that's what we have to use to buy and sell things on a day-to-day basis. But if the masses lose confidence in the currency, and this is why I think the Fed is fighting so hard with sort of these mind games that they play, talking about taking away QEs and so forth, is to keep people off base and keep them believing in the legitimacy of the paper monetary system. But if people lose confidence in the monetary system in mass, then I think the opposite would be true. I think that gold and silver would hold up as a currency. So if you can tell me when the masses of people will lose confidence in the paper money system, then I can tell you when I think that gold and silver will really hold up well in the next downturn.
Jay Taylor with jtaylormedia.com. Thank you for joining us today at soundmoneycampaign.com.
Thank you very much.